Buenos días a todos. Ya sé que queréis comer, voy a intentar ser razonablemente breve. En primer lugar, dar las gracias a la organización de la Rooted.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Rooted organization for allowing me to be here, talking a little bit about what I know. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I can actually tick off one of the things I wanted to do before I die, which is presenting at Rooted. I'm Senior Project Manager as to Grupo, and sometimes I'm also a happiness manager. And I think that some of my clients do not know what I do, but basically we just kick the back of systems attackers. We do forensic analysis, and we are 100% blue. But today we're going to talk about other things. This presentation was a bit diffuse, and you know what this is? Does it sound familiar? It's a Gauss bell, a normal distribution, and you may think, okay, where am I at with these crazy guys? Statistics, probability, first year subjects at university that we love so much. Well, these Gauss bells are so interesting because normal distribution allows us to do demographic studies and to share attributes in a certain and truthful way. For example, this is a distribution of a Gauss bell regarding values. And let's give an example. If Gauss does not lie, he usually doesn't, more or less 68% of all of us here should measure as a height attribute between 160 and 180 centimeters. 13.6% will be between 180 and 190. Please raise your hand if that's your case, more or less. 2.1% will be the people who are really tall, that is more than 190 centimeters, between 100 and 200. Are there anyone in the room? Yeah? Is there anyone in the room? Yes, there's a few hands. And then 0.1% is like the very top out of the scale. And those are the people higher than 200 centimeters. Is there anyone here? No. Okay, so more or less, this Gauss bell is useful to model attributes. So let's think about the skill as a set of abilities that allow us to develop a task, and we're going to adapt this to the ability for cybersecurity work. And now that Ricardo, on Thursday, in one of the beginning presentations of Rooted, did a massive algorithm model to define what is excellence in cybersecurity. But I would like to talk about three skills: basic your capabilities, your attitude, your eagerness and passion for learning, and your experience. Because eventually, the devil knows more for being old than for being the devil. So now we have a personal insight question. This Gauss bell distributing the capability for cybersecurity, where are you at? Being new or being the amazing hacks or very experienced? Are you here? In fact, this is a tricky question, This is the basis of my whole presentation. I kind of trolled you a little bit, because the right question is not where are you at, but rather, where do you think you are? And what's the problem here? That there is a separation between the ability, the perceived ability, how good you think you are, or we are, and the real ability, that is how good we really are. If we define this automatically, we see a problem, which is the deviation. The absolute value of that reference, of difference, is higher than 0, and these renders two problems: when the value is higher than 0, and when the higher value is lower than 0. And we'll treat both cases separately, because these are very different cases, and that's very important. And why does this happen? Due to the so-called cognitive bias, which is basically when your brain receives correctly the information, but because it's not convenient, interprets it in a totally wrong way. So your brain is trolling you, or we troll ourselves basically. Let's see what happens here. So first case, you think that you are here, you think that, I'm okay, when in fact, you're a really competent person. What is the basis of this? The basis of this, in fact, is that in cybersecurity, as I usually say, this is a very broad job. Well, you need to know a bit about everything. To be good in cybersecurity, you need to know about pen testing, reversing, threat intelligence, operating system, databases, programming, cryptocurrencies, regulation, languages, a bit of everything really. You need to have a wide range of abilities. Besides, it's just not enough to know a little bit, to have some foundations. You need to know a lot about many things. What happens here, this truth, if you work in cybersecurity, we need constant updating, working and knowing about everything all the time. At some point when you're happy with yourself, you can go and say, okay, I'm in a good place now, and then one day you open Twitter and you realize that a security rock star had launched a great exploit for something, or cybersecurity company launched a APP report that is amazing, or someone launched a tool that is amazing. You're like, okay, I'm not good enough, I'm a piece of shit basically. And that's what we call the impostor syndrome. That is, you are someone quite competent, but you think that you are less than you actually are, which is quite common in cybersecurity. A survey on Twitter done last year, out of 813 votes, not just 4 people, it's got a good sample. A third of the people thought that they were impostors on a daily basis, on a constant basis. Another third, that is 2/3, thought it pretty weekly or quite recurrently. They thought that they were bad technicians and worse than others.
It's also very interesting, and it's something that happens at all levels. This gentleman is Associate Director of the NSA. He's an engineer, he teaches engineering, is a C-130 pilot, and he says that he has this syndrome as well. So it's something that happens at all levels, not only the technicians, but the bosses as well, and the super bosses. So what are the consequences of this syndrome? The first one is anxiety. You believe that you are less than you are. I am a fraud. You start having anxiety, you think you're not good enough, and you have to become better. And this, I link a lot with the fear of missing out syndrome. That means that you are connected to Twitter, to the feeds, to try to be connected all the time and compensate, improve your capacities because you believe that you are not good enough. And that generates 2 more things. Stress, because it is impossible today to be good in everything to do with cybersecurity. I compare that with medicine. You may ask an eye expert who know a lot about ophthalmology, but you wouldn't ask an ophthalmologist to do heart transplants or even to say if this mycosis is caused by A or B. So people are under stress. They work many hours. They do everything they can, and that leads to burnout. We are always a few years behind United States, but in United States we're beginning to see how in conferences the mental health of security people is dealt with in conferences. It's a job with a lot of pressure, and there is a certain cost about the mental health of people working here. So how do we detect it? The main sentence is this feeling of you feel you're a fraud. So I've somehow misled my boss to hire me, and any day now they're going to notice that I'm not good enough and I'm going to be fired. When I do something right, I say, well, I was lucky today when I have these colleagues who really helped me out, or anything else. So success is never ours. It's always things that have happened for some other reason. And because I am a fraud, how am I going to dare to do new stuff if I leave my comfort zone? It's going to be obvious that I'm a fraud. So what happens with this? This is a considerable professional obstacle. Why? If you have this fear of doing new stuff, then you'll make less progress. You won't leave that comfort area and you won't make progress. And from a more selfish viewpoint, this fraud syndrome is the dream of the bad company owners. You have great people that if you put a bit of pressure on them, you can pay less for because they don't believe, they don't realize how good they are. So we're going to move forward a bit. Reality is that we have our knowledge, everybody has some knowledge, and things are not the way they look. It's not that everybody else knows a lot more. It's that we have our sphere of knowledge and other people have a different sphere of knowledge. But the level of knowledge might be very similar. So that's the first case. We're going to look at the second one. What happens when we believe that we are here and we're actually there? What's the name for this? This is a more academic name. It's what we call the Duning-Kruger effect. This is a book case of this effect. Was anybody sorry when this guy was finally found out? Was somebody happy when they say, great, you deserve that? What happens is that people then, this is the case when somebody feels they are much better than they are. For instance, I am a world expert in malware reversing, introduced in PLC industrial applications in CMIS 4.21. I am the boss here. So what happens with this? Well, the easiest way to detect it is there are very clear symptoms. It's when you have sore muscles in this area here, because you're always doing this gesture saying, I am the boss, I am the one who knows, nobody knows more than I do about this. So I'm the boss, I'm always right, and I am surrounded by people who are not as good as me. I put up with them because, and I don't go to Google or to Facebook because I'm not interested. So what happens? We have two problems here. These people are actually less able than they believe. They often compensate for that by stamping on people nearby. So they are not good to work with, and they are terrible bosses because they are always right, so you're always wrong. And that actually is another obstacle, another professional obstacle, because when you keep on sort of getting more and more responsibilities, people will notice that you pretend that you're the boss, but you are not so good, and people will realize and not want to work with you. And the world of cybersecurity is very large, but it's also very small. Everybody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. So how can we fight against this syndrome, the Duning-Kruger, is to know that all that you know is just one speck in the whole of knowledge. And I am not going to talk about PhDs, but this applies very well to the security world. So we would like for this standard deviation to be 0 or to approach 0. Okay, and how do we do that? We do it like engineers. We have this, we apply this feedback loop. We have this input that you analyze, and then you have some outputs. And with them, you rectify and you correct the signal to try to minimize mistake. In our normal language, that means a sincere and honest self-assessment. And how do we do that? Well, the first thing we have is to try to collect data rather than impressions. It's like I think or I feel this is, but no, you have to use data and, if possible, whenever possible, external sources. And it's better if you have 10 different inputs rather than 1 or 2. And this is a process, an ongoing process that you have to iterate. And this is the philosophy. That's the philosophy of the feedback loop. You don't do it once, but all the time. Advice or recommendations, there are a few that things that I recommend. Write a blog. That may sound silly. I know nothing. That's not true. I have solved hundreds of difficult problems thanks to the fact that somebody somewhere wrote in a blog something that happened to them. So it's very frustrating in the internet that you have an incredibly rare problem and know that somebody in internet who asked about the problem didn't write the answer. If you write, you have to think and to work and to be aware that because this is going to be read by a lot of people, then you take the you feel that you have to generate quality content, and that actually encourages or enhances your self-confidence. Another option is to participate in projects. There are many thousands of open projects, open code projects that you can participate in. And I hate when people say, my code is not good, so I won't collaborate. Well, maybe your code can be improved. But the first class in the networks subject, I was thrown a Kernighan of Richard, and they said for the end of the course you need to program this in a log. Well, I'm not a great programmer, but I have a very documented code. So if my programming is not good, maybe it's not, but my analysis of the whole problem, I can give it to you and you can improve it. And once you've improved my code, I can also use it, and that's a win-win situation. Something else that helps is teach. There is an old refrain that says, if you know you work and if you don't, you teach. I tried not to swear when I'm giving talks, but if you're teaching and you're really teaching, then you need a lot of trust in yourself, to have confidence to face 20, 30, 40 experts and to teach them something and be open to all of the questions that you're going to deal with. It's a great way of really knowing very thoroughly a subject and also to gain trust and confidence. I also recommend to be mentoring. Mentoring is very widespread in the United States, but it's not so common here in Spain. People with more years experience should take junior people and teach them, guide them, and say, if you like this, try these tools, you're going to like this. So you have to take people by the hand, and that's very interesting, because I've always said, and in cybersecurity really, experience is a great help. I've always thought that we all are in a pathway, and those of us who've made more progress have to help those that are coming behind and say, there's a stone there, there's water over there, and this is a great place to eat. And it's good because it also helps you learn, because people coming behind you have less experience, but they're not silly. I have learned a lot from the people I'm mentoring. So, and there's something else you can do here, which is also very interesting. I don't know if you know, but all of you who are engineers or have a degree, you can lead the end of the degree studies, and you can actually collaborate with the university. You can contribute in interesting projects. But I'm no longer at the university in Zaragoza, but I try to lead one project at least, because in many universities the end of the degree work is just something that the teacher can use for their PhD or for a project that are involved in. But if you're able to lead projects or ideas that you're giving people at the end of their studies to take a step into the world of cybersecurity with something else than just a degree. So what else can we do? Assessments. At some jobs you have every year a session about how well you've done things, and that has an impact on your bonus and so on. But in other cases you don't. But if you have a good relationship with your boss, that it would be a great idea to check with them. How am I doing? What do I do well? What can I improve? And sometimes they don't have the exact information, but they will certainly often give you an input that it will be valuable. For instance, you need to improve your reports. You're very good in forensics. Something else. Send proposals to conferences. No, I'm very bad. This is of no interest for anybody. This summer? No, a while ago, I almost took a train to a city that's not nearby to track physically somebody who was bigger than me to make a presentation at a conference. I have a Telegram conversation which is, no, come on, make that presentation. Come on, do it. You're going to be very successful. What you're doing is great. So he presented it. It was accepted, and it was a great success. So sometimes you're lacking trust, and if you prepare a talk and you document it properly, well, maybe you won't get it, but that's the worst that can happen. Something as recruitment processes. Recruitment process for the third companies is a perverse way of having a self-assessment. Why? Because you need you have a third person, a third party that's completely objective who assess you. I know somebody who does recruitment processes just as a sport. I won't name him because there are many companies here, but he probably has done a recruitment process with one of your companies. And people accept him because he's very good, and he does it when his morals are low. So he says no, and he confirms how good he is. And then you have to think of those processes as something positive, that you can get something out of. One of my mentor guys did sort of ask for a job in Facebook, and he had made it to the third interview, and there the recruiter said, but you have experience, and this is you have no experience. We asked for 2 or 3 years of experience, so it was great that he made it to the third interview in Facebook. So, and actually they said, we like your CV, you don't have the experience we need, but in 2 years' time do approach us. And he was his confidence was boosted really by this. What else can you do? brain is funny, and with these cognitive biases, if they tell you 9 good things and a bad one, what do you keep in mind? The bad one. So what should you learn to do? Well, you have to assess or value your achievements. Some months ago, there was a guy writing who told me he wrote down all his successes. Every time the boss said, "You've done very well," or somebody, he took a picture and he had a little file where he introduced all of his achievements, and when one day he was feeling lower, then he would take a look, and so it's silly, but since our brain is trolling us, we should also troll our brain. And also fear of failure. In the Saxon culture, fear of failure is not so present. You can fail, but at least you've tried. Whereas here in Spain, we're very critical with failures. He tried to do this and it didn't work. There was one sentence that I thought was of the founder of Dell, which is, "I never lose. Either I get it right or I learn." So we have to be brave enough to take risks, to leave our comfort zone, and also to learn from that failure. It's not bad to fail, it's part of the natural process of learning. What's important is don't fail twice at the same thing. So we have to learn and we have to improve as a person and as a professional. Let's assume that the cow is round. If you do not have one syndrome or the other, how can we help our colleagues? There's something that's incredibly cheap and it works very well, which is to acknowledge somebody else's achievements. I don't know if in leadership teams this is discussed, but people are not aware how important just a pat on the back has. It's zero cost and it has a great value. My boss said it was fine. That's a great feeling. Make constructive criticism. Our community is great, but we are a bit of a troll, really. Or maybe a lot of a troll, really. In Twitter is like a plague, really. So we have to learn to do constructive criticism. This is wrong, but you could approach it this way. How about doing that? You have that tool. Let's not be unnecessarily aggressive, but try to build. So that when I criticize, because sometimes you are giving and sometimes you are receiving. So if we can break this vicious circle, we're all going to be better. And then help out. This is something that's not so hard. I think we do this quite well because there's a great feeling in this community, and I think most of the time you'll find somebody to help out. What I also believe is very important is not to accept certain things. The fraud syndrome and the Duning-Krugers are opposite, but there is a particularly dangerous combination of those. What happens if in a room full of people who have different levels of the fraud syndrome, you introduce one Duning-Kruger? What's going to happen? You can tell both syndromes are going to look feedback with each other. So the fraud syndrome people are perhaps going to feel even less competent in the face of this Duning-Kruger syndrome. So what should we do? Well, if somebody is overdoing it, you should say, what are you doing? So to be an active part, to stop this phenomenon and part of the solution. And I like to use this concept of the epidemiologist, which is the group immunity. You see what the idea is, yeah? This is like a Duning-Kruger and the fraud system. If we try to block the effect of the Duning-Kruger, and the more people are on the what do you think you're doing or what do you think you're going, the impact of the Duning-Kruger on the population becomes very rare, and that's great for everybody. Okay, so to conclude, very quick conclusions. Being here is great, being here is great, and being here is also good. I have an important criticism for a trend that says, this is full of mediocre people. Being mediocre or being average means that you're here. So being average is not a problem because the work to get there and to stay there is very hard, and so it's fine. So being average is fine. But we have this feeling that either you are the best rock star, you're shit. And of course, there are people who are incredibly good in cybersecurity. But many of you remember about the Gauss belt distribution. But we are where most people are, and there's no problem with that. It's quite an achievement. What do we have to do? Well, we have to assess ourselves. We have to know with as much precision as possible where we are and to work to be a bit better. At the end of the day, we have to take into account that you cannot change your environment. You cannot make people smarter or sillier, but you can make yourself better. And there is a sentence from Nike that says you are only competing against yourself. You can certainly make sure that you are a bit better. And for that, what do we need to do? Well, basically, in many cases, we have to leave the comfort area. Stop being afraid. And we tend to forget we also have to be nice. I'm incredibly happy with my boss. That's one of the reasons why I'm still where I am. And one of the things he's done is that he doesn't hire cretins or stupid guys. And so people are nicer or not so nice, but everybody's reasonably nice. And that's something that makes the team, that gives the team a completely different feeling. So the final conclusion is that knowing ourselves a bit better, we're able to know how to improve ourselves and the techniques that I've mentioned. If you use the techniques I've mentioned here, you're going to generate knowledge that will improve the community. And the philosophy with which I want to finish is that if we improve and we produce better content, we help everybody else improve, and from being a great community we will move on to be just an astonishing community. Thank you. By the way, there you have the slides here if you want to use them.